The native people of North America didn't venture out to explore any other continent. But from across the ocean, others would come to them. Sometime during the first millennium in Europe, a radical new idea emerged. There was something out there, some new land beyond the Atlantic horizon. One of the earliest mentions is a far-fetched story of an Irish monk named Brendan. The story says that in the year 565, Brendan and 17 disciples went searching for a land of solitude. They sailed for 7 years, a journey fraught with danger through undiscovered waters. Monsters rose off their bow. Mermaids swam in their wake. Brendan even claimed to have held mass on the back of a whale. And then the monks came to land. Their small boat bobbed perilously close to the forbidding rocks of the coastline.
Soldiers of Christ, be strong in faith unfeigned, and in the armor of the Spirit, for we are now in the confines of hell. Watch therefore, and act manfully.
A few centuries passed in Europe before the next stories emerged of a new world, this time told by the Vikings. The Vikings were marauders, feared and loathed in Europe before they sailed west, first to Iceland, then Greenland. They were expert seamen, and they continued west until land loomed on their horizon. They found a small, sheltered bay at the end of a great peninsula. They built a wayfaring station and a repair depot for their ships and settled in for the winter. But the Vikings discovered there were people here, people they called Skraelings, after trolls in Scandinavian myth. The Vikings encountered a small group of these people and killed them. From that day, the settlement became a target.
They were ill-favored men with ugly hair on their heads. They had big eyes and were broad in the cheeks. They hissed like geese. Though the quality of the land was admirable, there would always be fear and strife dogging them on account of those who already inhabited it. So they made ready to leave.
At the time, no one took the Viking stories seriously. And for 400 years, the great expeditions were heading somewhere else, to the east. Vast caravans to fabled Cathay and India, bringing back gold, silk, cinnamon, pearls, and pepper. This was Europe, 50 million people, with its great capitals and city-states, Paris, London, Venice, Genoa. Much of Europe's wealth came from its trade with Asia. And Constantinople was the gateway that connected them. Then, in 1453, a disaster for Europe. Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Turks. Now Europe needed a new trade route to Asia and looked west across the Atlantic. No one suspected there might be an entire continent in the way. There was not only an entire continent across the Atlantic. There was a different universe, full of its own peoples and societies. Over 500 generations, North America had become a continent of nations unlike anything the world had ever seen. The northern part was occupied and claimed by hundreds of tribes, dozens of distinct peoples, each with its own way of life, its own gods, its own kind of wealth, its own name and lands. The Northwest was the land of the Dene, the Athapascan, the Slavey and the Dogrib, the Tuchoni, the Tlingit, and the Gwich'en. In the Arctic, the distant, isolated world of the Inuit. Along the Pacific coast, the Haida, the Salish, the Kwakiutl and the Yukwat, the Nishka, and the Gitxan. The people of the plains, the Blackfoot, the Blood, the Sarsi, and the Piegan. In the northern woodlands, the Cree and the Chipewyan. Near the Great Lakes, the Anishinaabe, the Algonquin, the farmers and warriors of the Iroquois and the Wendat. In the east, the nations of the Beothuk, the Maliseet, the Innu, the Abnaki, and the Mi'kmaq. They knew the land as their own. Corners of the country they called Dununde, Nunavut, Kanata, Canada. The Beothuk woman, Shauna Dithit, had drawn some maps for her guardian, William Cormac, to help him find the lost nation of the Beothuk. He followed the maps deep into the interior, but found no one. Then he realized the answers were in the maps themselves. Shauna Dithit had drawn stick figures, one group moving away from the other. She drew her own people in red. Food had been scarce inland, and they hadn't moved far enough to avoid European disease. With no immunity, the Beothuk started to die. Then she drew some figures in black to represent gangs of white men. Some settlers considered the Beothuk to be thieves. There were stories that they hunted the Beothuk down for bounty, killing everyone they could find.
Shauna Dithit received 2 gunshot wounds at 2 different times, from shots fired at the band she was with by the English people. One wound was that of a slug, or a buckshot that went through the palm of her hand. The other was a shot through her leg.
Disease, starvation, massacres. Shauna Dithit had always known the truth. Now William Cormac did too.
Britons have trespassed here, to be a blight and a scourge to a portion of the human race, a defenseless and once independent, proud tribe of men have nearly been extirpated from the face of the earth, scarcely causing an inquiry how or why. They have been dislodged and disappeared from the earth.
There were white settlers in other parts of Canada by now, some living alongside native people, some pushing them aside. By 1829, in Newfoundland, there was just one Beothuk left, and Shauna Dithit had tuberculosis.
Died at St. John's, Newfoundland, on the 6th of June last, in the 29th year of her age. Shauna Dithit, supposed to be the last of the Red Indians, or Beothuks. In Newfoundland, there has been a primitive nation, once claiming rank as a portion of the human race, that has lived, flourished, and now become extinct in their own orbit.
Shaunadithit's skull was packed in a metal box and sent to England to be studied in a laboratory. Attached to the shipment was a note. The skull and scalp of Nancy Beothick, Red Indian, female. She was tall and majestic, mild and tractable, but characteristically proud and cautious. Not all the native peoples of North America would share Shaunadithit's tragic fate, but none could avoid contact with outsiders. And when that happened, the whole course of human history changed. New ties would be forged, and old gods challenged. Neither side was sure the other was even human. It is a drama that would shape the destiny of this land. First contact. The European discovery of America launched one of the greatest adventures in world history. In Europe, it would dictate the fate of empires. Here, it would lead through dark forests and across deserts of ice. In a quest for riches, land, and human souls, a story written on a landscape as vast as the ocean.
These people have come from across the great water in wonderfully large canoes with great white wings like those of a huge bird. The men have long, sharp knives and black tubes which they point at birds and animals. Smoke from the black tubes rise in the air like smoke from our pipe. These men are strange in appearance. Their skin is white like snow.
The landmass before them was so immense that it took almost 300 years before European sailors touched its three shores, the Atlantic, Arctic, and Pacific. And on each of these shores, there are stories of those first defining encounters. In the east, French explorer Jacques Cartier would encounter a powerful chief along the river of Canada. In the north, an Englishman named Henry Hudson would risk mutiny and death while trying to find the Northwest Passage. On the Pacific shores, a young sailor would be plunged into a world beyond his wildest imagination. But at first, this was a world that no one expected or wanted to find, an obstacle in the way of the real European dream, a passage to China.